Today you can see another significant federal law enforcement presence here, and what's really been kind of a stunning militarization of city streets in Washington, D.C. These officers are federal law enforcement of some variety. I would love to tell you more, but they're not wearing any identifying badges, insignias, nameplates. They won't tell me where they're from or who they're with.
When other countries do this in other overseas invasions that they don't want to call invasions, we call these little green men. People who are in military or paramilitary garb and serving that sort of function, but nobody owns them. Nobody says who they are. Nobody admits who they are. As protests against the killing of George Floyd have continued for another day, for a seventh straight day in D.C., it's not just D.C. National Guard that's been patrolling the streets and D.C. cops. It's not even just the National Guard troops from 10 other states that aren't D.C. that the White House flew in. There's also this strange other force on the streets. Law enforcement officers, maybe, at least it seems like they're law enforcement officers, wearing no identifying insignia for any law enforcement agency, no name badges. And in many cases, even when they're asked by protesters or the press, they will not say who they are or who pays them. Take these guys in helmets and tactical vests. A reporter asked who they were with, they would say only the Department of Justice, which is not really an answer. It's not like there's a generic Department of Justice police force that explains that. Another reporter asked this group of gentlemen in riot gear if they were with the Bureau of Prisons, which is one of the federal agencies that has deployed some officers in Washington. They responded to that question with one word, quote, maybe we're with the Bureau of Prisons. That's cute. I mean, how do we know that these people are who they say they are at all? If they'll say anything at all. We just take their word for it that they're with the Department of Justice or maybe the Bureau of Prisons? And why are these guys wearing no badges, nameplates, no insignias? How does that help them in what they're doing in the streets? I mean, there's a reason a police officer who has the power to stop you, detain you, arrest you, use physical force against you. There's a reason a police officer has a badge number and a name in plain sight. The only reason to have officers take those identifying markings off is to avoid accountability for what they're doing, right? If they do anything wrong, it makes it a deniable offense, not just by them personally, if you can pick them out of a lineup, but also by anybody who might potentially be held accountable for having ordered that, offensive or injurious or illegal action against you. If these are just randomly unidentifiable people with no names and no agencies associated with them, what do you do if they violate your rights or hurt you? How do you know who did it? How do you know who issued their orders? But the other, and honestly darker prospect here, even darker than apparently federal law enforcement being deployed in this fashion against Americans in American streets. The even darker prospect here is this. I mean, who's to say these guys are law enforcement? What's to distinguish these unidentified, supposedly federal forces from random, self-motivated guys with guns who want to come down to these protests and play civil war as private citizens, or just hang out and be seen with their military-style weaponry and their off-the-shelf tactical gear? I mean, especially in the middle of a big rowdy protest, how are you going to tell the difference between unidentified, unname-badged federal officers and, say, this guy who showed up at a protest in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho today with a gun bigger than him and two more strapped to his back and his side? Or how about this guy who decided to do heavily armed traffic control at a protest in Casper, Wyoming, just on his own say-so, just your average local guy with a gun who's stopping you in the street? Or how about these randos who showed up at a rally in New Mexico, in their words, to, quote, protect people? I mean, one of these guys shoots you? We're supposed to fall back on, well, hey, maybe he was a cop? Maybe he was a soldier? Maybe he was, but who knows? Maybe he was some random self-motivated PE teacher with a Reddit account and a big weird gun collection? Just submit to their authority? Try not to get shot by them, and if you do,